Welcome back to the program. Updates from Russia's invasion of Ukraine now. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says he expects Ukraine to conduct an offensive against Russia in the spring, noting that Ukrainian forces had used a lot of ammunition since the start of the Russian invasion. Mr. Austin says members of the alliance are ready to ensure that Ukrainian armed forces obtain as much ammunition as quickly as possible. Speaking after a meeting with defense ministers of Ukraine allies in Brussels, Mr. Austin adds that there are currently no signs that Russia is amassing aircraft for a potentially larger air attack.
Conduct an offensive sometime in the spring, and because of that, all of the partners in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group have been working hard to ensure that they have the armored capability, the fires, the sustainment to be able to be effective in creating the effects on the battlefield. Ukraine has been at this for a year, and so they have used a lot of artillery ammunition. We're going to do everything we can, working with our international partners, to ensure that we get them as much ammunition as quickly as possible.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Defense Chief and NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg have praised what they called the Transatlantic Alliance's exceptional unity as the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine approaches. Both met in Brussels ahead of a meeting of NATO defense ministers. With the first anniversary of the invasion nearing on February 24th, the Kremlin has intensified operations across a broad area of southern and eastern Ukraine, and a big new offensive has been widely anticipated.
Secretary Austin and Lloyd, it's great to see you again so shortly after we met in Washington. And thank you for coming to NATO. It's always a great pleasure to welcome you here. And most of all, thank you for your strong commitment to the transatlantic bond, to the transatlantic relationship, to NATO, and for your leadership, your outstanding leadership in providing support to Ukraine, the leadership of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, and everything the United States have done to ensure that Ukraine gets the weapons, the supplies they need to win the war and to liberate the territory. So I look forward to the Defense Ministerial meeting, many important issues to discuss, but I always feel so assured when you are here, because then I have a strong support of our alliance and NATO and a strong support to Ukraine. So welcome.
Thanks for your leadership. You have very expertly led us through some very challenging times, and we're all very grateful for that and confident in your steady leadership. You know, we're a year into this Ukraine crisis. The Ukrainians have really done remarkably well as a result of some of the things that allies and partners are doing to provide security assistance. But, you know, in terms of this alliance, in terms of NATO, you've heard me say a number of times, I've never seen this alliance this united, despite the fact that we've been dealing with a number of challenges throughout the year, but your steady leadership has kept us in the right place, and we're all very, very grateful for that. So, again, look forward to a great meeting, and also look forward to interacting with our colleagues here. So, welcome, all the best.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says the situation on the front lines in Donetsk and Luhansk remains particularly difficult after NATO defense ministers met to discuss military aid. Ukraine's military said on Tuesday its forces had repelled attacks in 5 settlements in Luhansk and 6 in Donetsk, including around Bakhmut, over the past 24 hours. It comes as Western defense chiefs met in Brussels to discuss new arms provisions to Kyiv, which is pleading for greater firepower and maintenance of existing supplies.
And of course, today, as every day, I was in touch with our military, our commanders. I had a few meetings. The situation on the front line, especially in Donetsk and Luhansk regions, remains very difficult. The battles are literally for every foot of Ukrainian land. Today is the day when a new Ramstein meeting takes place, the meeting of the UA Military Support Group, 54 partner countries. This is the 9th such meeting, and we have new potent decisions for the defense of our country, for making our warriors stronger. We got confirmation from our partners about more air defense weapons, more tanks, more artillery and shells, more training for our military. It was said today Ukraine must be successful. We are in agreement here. Success must come. Of course, far from everything about Ramstein can be made public. A large part of the discussions are better left behind closed doors of the contact group session. Yet, I can confidently say that basic trends remain unchanged. UA and partners together are doing everything so that the terrorist state can be vanquished, and so that it happens sooner.
Meanwhile, Russia has held at least 6,000 Ukrainian children, likely many more, in sites in Russian-held Crimea and Russia, whose primary purpose appears to be political re-education, and that's according to a US-backed report. The report said Yale University researchers had identified at least 43 camps and other facilities where Ukrainian children have been held that were part of a large-scale systematic network operated by Moscow since its February 2022 invasion. It adds that the children included those with parents or clear familial guardianship, those Russia deemed orphans and others who were in the care of Ukrainian state institutions before the invasion, and those whose custody was unclear or uncertain due to the war.
A report released today by Yale University's Humanitarian Research Lab through the department-supported Conflict Observatory Program details Russia's systematic, government-wide efforts to permanently relocate thousands of Ukraine's children to areas under Russian government control via a network of 43 camps and other facilities. In many cases, Russia purported to temporarily evacuate children in Ukraine under the guise of a free summer camp, only to later refuse to return the children and to cut off all contact with their families. Such actions obviously will have serious long-term implications on these children's development. The network of facilities which these children are sent is vast, spanning from Russia-occupied Crimea, across Russia itself, from the Black Sea region to its Far East. The report indicates how these abusive practices involve officials and other individuals at all levels of Russia's government. Putin seeks to rob Ukraine of its future by taking its children. Russia's system of forced relocation, re-education, and adoption of Ukraine's children is a key element of the Kremlin's systematic efforts to deny and suppress Ukraine's identity, its history, and its culture. The devastating impacts of Russia's failing war of aggression will be felt for generations to come. This report and others like it reinforce U.S. and international resolve to pursue accountability for Russia's war crimes and other atrocities in Ukraine for as long as it takes.
Now let's hear from Russia, where its embassy in Washington has dismissed the U.S. report that alleges Moscow is operating a network of camps holding thousands of Ukrainian children as absurd. The embassy said in a statement, which partly reads, we took notice of the absurd statements of State Department spokesperson Ned Price, who had accused our country of forced transfer and deportation of Ukrainian children to the territory of the Russian Federation. The statement adds that Russia accepted children who had been forced to flee with their families from the shelling and atrocities of the armed forces of Ukraine. We do our best to keep minors in families and, in case of absence or death of parents and relatives, to transfer orphans under guardianship. We ensure the protection of their lives and well-being. The embassy also accused the United States of being complicit in the alleged deaths of children in Russian-occupied parts of eastern Ukraine. Well, two United Nations bodies have made an appeal to raise $5.6 billion to support the Ukrainians most affected by the Russian invasion. The announcement, made jointly by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs and the UN Refugee Agency, comes days before the one-year anniversary of the invasion. The humanitarian response plan for Ukraine, which includes hundreds of local Ukrainian organizations, is seeking $3.9 billion in funding while the refugee response plan for refugees from Ukraine called for $1.7 billion.
Relief Coordinator and Filippo Grandi.
We're asking today for $3.9 billion for this year's humanitarian response plan in Ukraine. Over 11 million people are targeted by this response plan. More than 7,000 civilians have been killed in Ukraine, according to our estimates, in the last year. Almost certainly a low estimate. 12,000 civilians have been injured, again, according to our estimates, and no doubt a low estimate. Hundreds of children, of course, shockingly among those numbers. So I urge all those generous governments and people and civil society and people like you and me around the world to give generously today, and you can be sure that the funding will go to those who need it in Ukraine.
The refugee component of what we launched today is $1.7 billion for this year. It is very complementary to what is being done. That's why we're launching the two appeals together. It concerns 10 countries. The Ukraine refugee crisis, displacement crisis, remains the largest in the world, clearly. It's almost 6 million estimated internally displaced people, plus, the refugees in Europe who have registered for temporary protection are close to 5 million now, 4.8 million, but we know that there's many more that have not. So the scale of displacement is continues to be quite massive.